think that when I was on my first concert tour of the UK, I think they asked if I would record Rachmaninoff 3 with Fistulari. And I said yes, with pleasure. So I met with him, and we had a very good contact, and we recorded. That was how it was. And then when I stayed in England, after that I didn't go back to Russia, Decca decided to ask me for an exclusive contract. And I agreed. I was so touched by it and impressed that they were interested in this. And I thought, fantastic, it's such a great company asked me to record. So I was very grateful, and I did record, and some records were not so bad, so they asked me to record more. That's how it started, in '63. My goodness, it's frightening, isn't it? Andre was always very a close friend from a very early age, actually. I think we met in LA on my maybe second American tour in '62, or maybe even in '58, maybe the first American tour. And he said he heard me and he was impressed by my playing. I was very touched by this comment. And when he became the principal conductor of the LSO, he asked me to record with him. Of course, I was delighted because he had been a friend already. And we recorded quite a lot. It was very easy to communicate with him and to record with him, no problem at all. And the orchestra liked very much our collaboration. So it was a very good time, sort of almost non-problematic, except difficult to play, of course. When I did a lot of Chopin, they said, would you like to do it all? I said, well, I never thought of that. Yes, why not? Because not all is great music. Chopin, a lot of early pieces that are very sort of beginner's music, you know. But it was very interesting to trace his eventual blossoming. So I enjoyed it tremendously, actually. I learned a lot too, because you know, when you play only the best pieces, and the whole statue of the composer is not quite the same. So it was interesting. Beethoven is one of my heroes, of course, but everybody, everybody's hero, of course, mine too. I enjoyed so much. I recorded all the violin sonatas, all the cello sonatas, and trios, everything. Again, we didn't know it would be so successful. We just played it, recorded it. We played it so many times. Just unbelievable. Do you want some funny story? Do you like funny stories? There are two of them, actually. I think one of them, when we played all the Beethoven sonatas in Carnegie Hall, one of the evenings we started with the Spring Sonata, and just about 1 minute into the piece, he broke one of the strings, Itzhak. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, so everyone applauded, sorry. And he went backstage, put another string, came back. Ladies and gentlemen, I decided to rename this sonata for a string sonata. They loved it, of course. That's typical Itzhak. So, yeah. Anyway, yes, I enjoyed it very much. Come back to serious stuff. Well, people ask me very much, why did I start to conduct? There is no proper answer to this question, because lots of people don't even know of the fact that the orchestra was for me maybe the most sublime, maybe, orchestral repertoire, and what orchestra could do for our great music was for me something that nothing else I think in my life could approach that. The expression, the incredible, all-embracing repertoire. unconsciously, of course, I was attracted to the symphony orchestra from the very early age. I'll never forget the very first time I heard the symphony orchestra in Moscow, in the big hall of our conservatory. I was 8, I think, because one of my classmates, his father was in the orchestra, in the State Symphony Orchestra. He said, would you like to come to an afternoon concert on Sunday? I said, yes, sure. And that was it. I lived in London from 63 to 72, something like that. My wife's father, my father-in-law, was a conductor of a very small amateur orchestra. He usually conducted them in Hendon, in Hampstead, sort of in small places. He was quite a good conductor, but he never made a big career. But he understood that it's so important for him, all this orchestral music. I knew so much of this music. He said, why don't you conduct? I said, no, I don't want. Well, I have a small orchestra. Why don't you do Coriolan, say? And then accompany a friend of mine, Haydn Violin Concerto. I said, well, okay. You teach me how to do Coriolan. He tried to teach me all this. I conducted finally in a kind of public concert. Of course, no papers knew about it. Of course, no. There was no press or anything. Then we moved to Iceland at some point, just about 72, 73. I invited Daniel Barenboim to come and conduct the Iceland Symphony Orchestra. They were delighted, of course. He was just beginning his conducting career. Not so much yet, but already was doing quite a lot. And he said, yes, I'll come for 2 concerts. You play in one, was just before Christmas. 2 concerts would be nice, and Pinke Stuckerman should play the next concert. Okay. Pinke fell ill and didn't come. And we said, what do we do tomorrow? Daniel said, well, we couldn't repeat the same repertoire. It wouldn't be right somehow. Because the country is small and it wasn't right, wouldn't be right. And he said, why don't you conduct for me? I'll play 2 Beethoven concertos. I said, but you know them, you play them yourself. I said, yes, that's true, but still they're tutti. Oh, never mind, you manage. So he played 1 and 3, 2 Beethoven concertos, and I conducted. I fouled up a few places, of course I did, but basically I was all right. And musically it wasn't too bad. He played very well. And the orchestra, they said, why don't you come and conduct us sometimes for some radio broadcast or some concerts maybe? I said, well, I'll try. So that's how it basically started, with the Iceland Symphony Orchestra. They were very nice to me. And I conducted many concerts with them, and I never thought I'd do more than that, international career. But once my manager, Mr. Parrott, who's still my manager, came to Iceland, I think because his wife was playing with me, Christina Ortiz, and he was quite impressed by my amateurish conducting. He said, why don't you conduct in the UK too? I said, no, I don't know. Anyway, I did a little bit here and there. And finally, I conducted the Philharmonia Orchestra. That was extremely risky for me, because I still couldn't really be very clear. And I did Tchaikovsky Manfred Symphony. Anyway, I won't go into too much, but I was so impressed that in spite of my shortcomings, they played very well. And I was so touched by their readiness to play with me, and warmth too. They're wonderful people. I thought I'd invite them to a champagne party in the festival hall, in the reception room. So most of them came. It was an afternoon concert, the second one. And I took some of them into a corner. I said, tell me honestly, it's difficult to play with me. They said, you know, never mind, you're just beginning, you will learn. That is not so difficult to learn this. But we love the music you are making, and please come again, we'd love to play with you, because we feel that you express something. I was so touched, I can't tell you, almost to tears. I said, well, thank you very much. So I always came back to the Philharmonian, and that is how it eventually went on and on and on. When the Soviet Union was formed, or the revolution was in 1917, basically, it was a very difficult time for music in the Soviet Union, of course. Shostakovich, people said he was close to suicide even. I don't know how true it is, but he was unbelievably depressed, of course. And they cancelled his Fourth Symphony performance. Some people came to the rehearsals of the Fourth Symphony in Leningrad, and one of them said to Shostakovich, there is an opinion that perhaps you shouldn't have it performed now. So he cancelled the performance. And that was the first performance in 1961, I think, in Moscow. Can you imagine how many years in between? So the position of the government, of the spirit of the Soviet system, of course, was that that creativity had to be not exactly suppressed. Oh no, we're the freest country in the world, you know. But it had to be positioned only in a way that the Soviet mentality and the attitude to the existence of the great Soviet people, that the attitude would be absolutely as the party wanted it, without any complications, without anything that makes people think or feel too much. That's what they tried to do. They didn't succeed in it with Shostakovich. Because, as you probably know, when he composed his Fifth Symphony, which was the answer to the just criticism, as he said, this wasn't really the answer to just criticism. Although on the surface of it, it was. It was kind of optimistic, in inverted commas, but the basic substance of that of the message of the Fifth Symphony was not optimistic. But it ended optimistically, and it was all accessible to anybody who would listen to it. There was no more some unbelievable sounds that you can't understand why they exist. It was all very clear. And the party didn't know what to do about it. They were not all idiots. Some of them understood that what he wanted to say was not exactly what they wanted him to say. But on the face of it, it was all kind of acceptable. So there was no review of this symphony for many months. And finally there was one which was positive, because they couldn't write a negative review. But the success was such that it was beyond description. I mean, all the people, I think, applauded Shostakovich for about 20 minutes. So it was quite unbelievable. Even in the Soviet Union, they couldn't ignore it. That was fantastic. And then the war came, and of course he composed the Seventh Symphony, Eighth, and he was a hero, basically. You know his photographs, and he was trying to extinguish the bombs in Leningrad and everything. He was evacuated eventually. So he was a hero of the Soviet Union. And then they asked him to compose a Victory Symphony. Now, Shostakovich was one of the most honest people in the world. You can imagine that. And he couldn't compose a Victory Symphony because the war was won by such sacrifice that it was beyond description. We lost 20 million people in the war, and that was, we know that we lost 20 million people. How many more million people that we can't count, we don't know, but 20 for sure. And Stalin was one of the perpetrators of this loss, no question about it. Now, how could Shostakovich, in his sane mind, write a Victory Symphony? He couldn't. So he wrote the Ninth Symphony, you know Ninth Symphony. So it was kind of, the Victory Symphony, you couldn't call it. And the solo, trombone solo before the finale is a lament, of course. And however stupid the party people were, they realized that. And he was denounced again in the press. Yet again. He thought his life was finished again. That was the life of Shostakovich. He gets a phone call from the Philharmonic Society. The Comrade Shostakovich, you're going to America next week. He said, what? I'm not going anywhere. What do you mean? The Soviet government, on the cultural exchange, which was signed by both parties, decided to send you along with other Soviet composers. Prokofiev wasn't well, he couldn't go. But Kabalevsky, somebody else, I can't remember now, you're going with the delegation of Soviet composers. No, I'm not going anywhere. What do you mean you're not going? Party and government, that's our thing. Party and government are sending you. No, I'm not going. So Stalin phoned him, and the next day, or maybe the day after, Stalin was very busy, of course, he couldn't phone the next day probably. Anyway, he phoned to say, Comrade Shostakovich, yes, Comrade, it's Comrade Stalin, yes, Comrade, I hear that there's a problem of you going to the United States. Yes, Comrade, what is the problem? Well, Comrade Stalin, what can I tell the Americans? My music is not performed in my country after the denunciation by Zhdanov. Only the Fifth Symphony, which was composed in the 30s, and that's about it. What will I tell the Americans? Is that so? He said. Your music is not performed. That is correct, Mr. Comrade Stalin. You know what he said? Let me see what I can do about it. Can you imagine? Eh? The dictator says, let me see what I can do about it. So of course they phoned him next day, which symphony would you like to perform before you go to America? So, and from then on, his music was performed again.
Did you ever meet him, Shostakovich?
Yes, I met him. I played his trio for him once with my friends, conservatory students. He was very nice. I don't know how well we played. We thought we played quite well in his apartment. And they said, so what would you like? Oh, wonderful, wonderful, very, very good. And you would say something, no, it was very good. We'd like some coffee, some tea, that was all. Didn't say anything. I hope he liked it, but who knows? A lot of music speaking to me. Of course, he was a very unusual, very great composer who devoted all his existence to what he was trying to express in his music. Very difficult existence, but he managed to say something important, I think. Playing an instrument is quite something else than conducting an orchestra. As you know, conducting an orchestra first, of course, they have to rely on you, the musicians of the orchestra, true, but you rely on them too. So it's very much a joint effort, very much so. Of course, a lot depends on me, of course, a lot depends on them too. And if the relationship is reasonably good, you can hope for a reasonably good performance. When you play the piano, of course, you are absolutely alone and nobody can help you. Also, I also think that some things that I could play very well, say 15, 20 years ago, I might not be able to play as well now. And there are many examples of instrumentalists who keep on playing until people say, well, he or she played much better 20 years ago. I don't want to be one of those, you see. So I prefer to record is a different story. You can play the same piece 2 or 3 times, and when it's really all right, then you release it. That I can do. But public performance is something else. And if I fail, at least in my own opinion, I don't want to do it. And I know that with age, of course, it's more difficult to be in total control of everything. So I'm very realistic, generally in my life, and in this too. So that is my basic explanation. But I practice every day, and I record all the time. You might know that I recorded, now completed all Rachmaninoff piano music. About a year ago, the Sonata No. 1, Chopin Variations, and this year the last record will come out. That's some short pieces. So complete Rachmaninoff. So I can play the instrument. It's very hard to play, but I prefer to do it this way as I'm doing it now. See, my life was a Russian pianist in the West, because I had played a lot of Russian music. Beethoven was quite natural for me to play. Bach, I probably wouldn't dare to play in public concerts too much. I find that has to be, I don't know, a tremendous responsibility, both spiritual and pianistic too. And I never thought of playing Bach. I played it at concerts, but not so often. And when Decca said, look, you recorded just about almost everything, how about Bach? I said, you would like to do that? They said, yes. I said, okay, I'll do it. But to do record is a different story. Of course, you work at home and you come to the studio, you can play it a few times and you think, well, now I can let it go. So that's why I waited a long time and finally did it, because it's terribly important for me to be able to do something like that. My destiny, my calling is to do what I'm doing, and it means so much to me. Music for me, as you know what Beethoven said about music, I don't need to repeat that. It's one of the highest expression of human mind. most probably. That's what I think too. So I'm privileged that I'm a musician and I have something to say. I hope I have something to say. So that's life.